So good morning and welcome, everybody. My name is Véronique Desbrosses. I am General Manager of GESAC, and I will monitor this press conference on a new study on music streaming commissioned by GESAC and undertaken by Emmanuel Legrand, who is a world-renowned expert in music and media industry, a specialized journalist, and a consultant. So first on housekeeping information. So this press conference is taking place here in Brussels in the Press Club, but it is also attended online by journalists from all over Europe and even above. And it is also broadcasted for GESAC members. There will be a Q&A session, but it's only open to journalists who can raise their question either orally if they are here in this room, or through a dedicated chat box if they are attending online. And my colleague, Burak Özgen, will convey to the speakers the written question received online. As regards the program, we will start with a short keynote address from the GESAC president, Gernot Branninger. Then Emmanuel Legrand will make the presentation of the study itself, followed by a short conversation with two prominent experts from the GESAC community, Tobias Holzmüller, General Counsel at GEMA, and David El Sayeg, Deputy CEO at SACEM. And then there will be the question and answer session. So without any further delay, dear Gernot, I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Veronique. Ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the press, dear friends and colleagues, I wish you a very good morning. It's an early morning, but it's sunny outside. So we are happy to have you with us. And I thank you for joining us today for the presentation of this new study that is on the role of authors and composers in the music streaming market. Streaming is an important topic not only in the music sector, it's important for the whole creative industries, but of course we are focusing on this segment. We all know that music streaming has got a very popular form of music engagement among the consumers, has got one of the main distribution channels of music. And of course, this represents a great opportunity for the composers and the songwriters and the music industry in general. On the other hand, this constant and exponential increase of users and usages at the same time is not properly reflected in the authors and composers' revenues. And this is the main message of our press conference. We, the authors' societies, are taking all necessary steps to ensure, to facilitate the marketing of creators' works, but at the same time we are concerned that the current market conditions and certain dysfunctions in operation of the service do not enable to allow to realize the full potential that would be possible for authors and composers and all right holders in general. Authors' societies are value-creating entities. And it's important to note that in trusting the rights to the societies, authors are empowered, they are supported, and they are getting a service on a very high level. And if an author joins a society, then he could not make a better decision because he knows that his rights are administered in a proper way. The bargaining activities are made collectively, and the money that the societies are paid back to them in direct proportion to the use made of their work. So also societies are non-profit organizations. There is no money left. Everything goes to the authors. This is important. Author societies are not only cash machines. They are also funding social and cultural activities, and they promote cultural diversity, and they foster the development of new generations of creators. And if we speak about
sustainability, and this is a topic in all industries all over the world, much more for the younger generation than for the elderly, then we do not find more sustainable enterprises than the author societies are. Why? Because they have not only a huge experience taken from the past, but they also have a very concrete future mission with a long-term perspective based on stability and on accountability. Having said this, for the author sides, of course, we also feel committed to our licensing customers' needs, facing the challenges of new distribution challenges, new business models, and new forms of deals. When the internet came up, I remember very well, this was a challenge for the societies, not because we now were facing new licensing partners, but we also had to get along with the switch from the territorial to the repertoire-oriented licensing schemes. So the societies had to develop new practices. They had to show in their databases that the documentation of the works has to be split. And this was a challenge for the societies, but they made it, they adapted, and they showed high flexibility in order to adapt to the market conditions. So the societies developed best practices of rights clearance in order to ensure the availability of widest possible content for the consumers, but also took care that the creators are getting a fair remuneration. And all in all, the author societies are an essential part of developing a more dynamic and more successful market. And we hope very much that the findings of this study will contribute to this objective. And I now would want to commend Emmanuel Legrand for his insightful and comprehensive analysis. He has deep knowledge, he has experienced more than 30 years in this field and a world-renowned expertise. And without wasting more time, I now give the floor to Emmanuel, and then after that we will hear the experts from GESAC in order to enter into more interactive process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gernot. The time is yours.
Check, check, works. Yep. So, hello, my name is Emmanuel Legrand. Does it work? Mm-hmm. Does it not? It's on?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, I went too far. Okay, so this is why we're here. It's beautiful to see it in print. It has a very long title, Study on the Place and Role of Authors and Composers in the European Music Streaming Market. And I am the author of this study. I'm Emmanuel Legrand. I have been a journalist for as long as I can remember, and worked for a few interesting publications such as Billboard, Music and Media, Music Week, and a few others. I now run a platform called Creative Industries News that I launched a year ago exactly, and I'm quite happy to report that it's doing well, even though it's a lot of work. And I even found a few hours to actually write a few thousand words for this report. The idea of the study, when Veronique and Burak came to see me, was to say, well, we have an issue in the sense that, and I'm going to paraphrase, there is something like an authors and composers blues with regards to streaming, in the sense that, where do authors and composers fit into the streaming economy? And there's been a lot of discussions about streaming in recent times, especially in the UK, but not only in the UK. My friend here on the left from GEMA issued a study on streaming a few days ago. So it is a prominent topic. But we heard the voice of the record companies, the performers, but the voice of the authors and composers was, rarely heard. So the main question that I was asked to answer is, how do authors and composers connect with the new streaming economy, and what can be done to improve the relationship between the two parties if there are problems? So this is what I started doing. So let's go to the goal of the study. There's many ways to approach streaming. You can dissect it in many ways you want. It is the first and foremost way through which people access music these days, and it's been reflected, over and over, and that has brought back growth into the music industry. But has this growth been, shared in the right way, in a fair way, throughout the different stakeholders? So the study focuses on the impact of the streaming economy on authors and composers. It tries to identify areas where added value to authors and composers could be brought, and where best practices could be found in order to have a more author-friendly streaming ecosystem and a fairer ecosystem. It also highlights the concerns and expectations of authors and composers when dealing with the streaming experience. And also, there's a few recommendations to ensure the development of, cultural diversity, but also a fair ecosystem. Methodology, well, it's usually the same thing that, everybody does. I read a lot of reports. There's been amazing work done by people like Chris Cook, and the Dissecting the Digital Dollar, for example, was one of the benchmarks. There's the report from the UK's DCMS that really also highlighted a lot of things related to the streaming economy. Will Page, of course, the economist from PRS and from Spotify, who keeps on injecting a lot of thoughts into the industry. I read a lot of companies' annual reports, from GEMA, SACEM, and other societies, and read a lot of articles from my platform, but also all my colleagues who are actually probably on the other side, which is normally where I am, and I would be taking notes and and not being here on the podium. Media research also provided a lot of information, because how sharp Mark Mulligan can be, and that's really good. And I also received a certain number of data sets from GEMA members, from CMOs. So methodology, I also added about 20-25 interviews with stakeholders, covering the whole range from songwriters, authors, composers, CMOs, music publishers, record labels, data specialists, and how they love to talk about data, and also streaming services. And there's a questionnaire. You find the questionnaire at the back end of the report. Lots of questions, and a lot of questions also remain unanswered, because some of them could not be answered. I had a lot of discussions with stakeholders, and I also had the very useful input from the Secretariat and from Burak, whose mind is always connected and can point what is wrong and what works. Thank you, Burak, actually. So in a nutshell, and I will paraphrase Gernot, is the purpose of the study is to have a better understanding of authors and the collective management organization expectations from the growing streaming market. And I think that sums it up. So let's start with authors and composers in the streaming economy. It's the music industry is based on songs, and that has been somehow been forgotten. And we tend to focus on the recording and on the performance, but the foundation of it is a song. It's usually one or multiple people getting together and finding a hook, a chorus, lyrics, and putting that together, and that becomes a song. And what is fascinating with streaming is that, as opposed to the previous format, it is definitely a song economy. You go on a streaming service usually to listen to a song, not a whole album, usually not, or you have to be old like me to do that. So that brings us really back to the origin of sheet music and not street music, as written in the report, and we apologize for that typo. to what we are seeing today is, people consuming songs by the billions of streams. And, that's around the world. And, in South America, they use more likely YouTube than streaming services. In China, they use mostly Chinese, and so on. But it is a global phenomenon. And in that environment, the key thing is that authors and composers' role has not been really reflected. They are usually at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the economy. So that's what we're trying to address. The report is not going to reinvent the wheel, but the idea is really to put the authors and composers back into the discussion and make sure that the streaming economy will answer some of their expectations, some concerns, and also make it a better and fairer ecosystem for themselves. So after discussing with a lot of people and analyzing all the answers I had, there were three main concerns. The first one is that there is an asymmetry between the goals of streaming services, which is basically to have as many users as possible, especially using for those who have it, the advertising supported part of the business, and the aspiration of the authors and composer, which is to have, as many streams as possible, and also the best revenues possible, which, also goes back to a main point, which is that the value that consumers put into the streaming service has not fundamentally changed since 2006, and we're still into a $9.99 pound euros model, mostly in Western economies, and that has not changed. Therefore, the pot has grown because the number of subscribers has grown, but the volume extracted per user has not grown. Secondly, there's structural issues about fairness in the streaming ecosystem, and I'll go through some of them. And last but not least, I call it a systemic imbalance, and I had a few friends who actually did not like it because they were from the label side. A systemic imbalance in revenue allocation, and that's what I mentioned, is that maybe, to be fair, the system needs to be probably retooled in some ways. So now let's, I've mentioned it a little bit, the asymmetry. As I said, there's 424 million, probably, it's now 550 million subscriptions globally, and the services have been expanding also their offer. It started with 10 million tracks. Now we have some services that have 50, 70, up to 90 million tracks. I don't know where they find all these tracks and who has time to listen to them, but it probably would take quite a few billion lives to actually listen to all these tracks. But they do exist, and this is part of the offer. The services have also started offering, high resolution files. They have also created more user-friendly interface and different perks that users can access. Let's continue with the second part, which is the decreasing value. And that's what I was saying, is that since the price of the subscription has not changed, the value extracted, which is called the average revenue per users, has decreased over the past 15 years. And that has created an imbalance in the sense that, there's more and more people actually using streaming services, but the money that each user is bringing back into the system is lower than it was 15 years ago. And that has to do also with a lot of the promotional schemes that are used by the streaming services, such as the extended free tiers. You have versions, for families, you have versions for students, etc., which dilutes the amount of money that households will pay for the subscription, which in turn dilutes the amount of money that goes back into the system. So let's talk about the structural issues now. Yes, you have 70, 90 million songs. Yes, you have songs that, reach 1 billion streams, 2 billion streams and more. It's a small club, and congratulations to them. But 93% of Spotify artists have fewer than 1,000 monthly listeners. So that says a lot, is that there is a very, very there is a pyramid where there's a few on top, and there is a lot of people whose music is actually never listened to. There might be reasons, there's quality, but there's also the way the music is exposed, the way the algorithms works, etc. There's other systemic problems such as, and that has been raised quite a few times in the interviews that I had, you have songs that have ghostwriters. There's composers who do not exist, who have wonderful names and produce songs that have great names, but they don't exist in reality. Well, they do, but it's fake names. There's also streaming fraud, which is actually affecting absolutely everyone, from the services to all the rights holders. That's a problem. And there's recently, it has been raised quite a few times, what you would call payola schemes. It's, basically paying for, being listened to. There's one scheme that, has been put in place by Spotify, which against lower royalties, songs will get more exposure on the platform, and that's borderline. Some people think it's a good idea. Most people actually that I interviewed thought it was not necessarily a very good idea. There's also a lack of transparency in the algorithms that are used by streaming services, in terms of pushing music to the users, and what are the criteria that are used, to program the algorithms. And maybe there should be more efforts to actually expose more the diversity of the music available, but also the diversity of authors and composers, songwriters, and the type of music that they're doing through the discoverability and the use of algorithm. And that for the benefit of cultural diversity, because that, especially in Europe, is a fundamental point. So let's talk about the split of the pie, which is, I know, a very hot issue at the moment, especially in the UK, where you have had all these debates through the DCMS inquiry, and but it mostly affected. It was about performers and the share of performers, and so what we, and it's a rough estimate, and it's when you on a dollar, or on a euro, or on a pound, or whatever currency, usually the streaming service keeps 30 to 34%, 35%, depending on, of course, there's taxes. So let's forget, that's after taxes. And then on the 70% remaining, 55% more or less goes back to labels and performers, and 15% goes back to songwriters and music publishers and CMOs. That model is inherited from the past. It's more or less the CD model. If you take off the 30-40% was actually the distribution fee, more or less. And the share allocated to songwriters and publishers is also inherited from these days. But in the streaming economy, when it's a song economy, and when music publishers and songwriters are usually at the origin of the songs, the question is whether or not that split of the pie is actually the fair one. And the answer from most stakeholders, at least on the side of authors, composers, publishers, and CMOs, is it is not. The idea is not necessarily to have a 50-50 split between labels and performers and songwriters and music publishers. That's not the idea. But there's certainly a question of rebalancing that pie. And that will be between the stakeholders to find that. So I was trying to sum up what can be done and how to move forward. And I was tooling in my head, and suddenly I had that eureka moment, and which I sum up on this slide, which I think is really says what the study is about. The first aspect is recognition, and we want to be known for our songs. Authors and composers want to be identified and recognized, but so we want to be known. The second part is remuneration. We want to be paid fairly for our songs, and that's the point I was raising earlier. And last but not least, but also at the foundation of that is identification and attribution, is that we want our songs to be found. And that, sends us back to data issues that we're going to be talking about now. So let's start with recognition. Recognition, basically can take multiple forms, but it is basically a way to get authors and composers at the forefront, not necessarily as performers, but being able to be identified for their songs. So there should be, and there's a need for tools to increase the visibility and discoverability of authors. I can go on my streaming service, and if I search, I can find, but not always, the names of authors and composers. But I cannot necessarily click on that in order to have access to, for example, all the songs that Max Martin, who's probably the most successful songwriter these days, has been composing and producing for the past 10, 15 years. And that is one of the issues that a lot of authors and composers, songwriters have, is that how can people listen to our music if they don't know who we are and how to find our music? So suggestion is, maybe there should be targeted clickable search functions for authors and their works, horizontal rather than vertical. There should also be, and that's something that has been raised by what you call the smaller countries with a repertoire that is in a language that is not necessarily in English or in Spanish, is equal access to market, so that they're also, all these authors and composers, songwriters and their works are pushed. More transparency on the algorithm, that's what I said before. More monitoring from stakeholders, but also from the European Commission about what is been listened to and how it's been exposed, in order to ensure that there's cultural diversity. And maybe also ways, and that's also knocking on the door of the European Commission, more ways to actually promote and expose European works in tandem, working with stakeholders and especially with the DSPs. So let's talk about remuneration. We already mentioned that. The idea mostly is to grow the revenue pie, maybe retool some of the pricing models. We're not here to tell streaming services, this is what you have to do, this is mandatory, whatever, but try to think about something where if you have been offering high resolution files recently at no additional cost to the user. So I understand that you want to improve the quality of the experience for the user, but shouldn't that also be, a little perk that you pay for if you want very good, sound quality? Making sure that the authors and the composers and the publishers and the CMOs benefit for, more favorably or more fairly from the growing pie. Address the value gap. That's something that, is part of a discussion almost from a previous century, Article 17 and all that, but it still exists. The French organization SNEP published this week the first half figures for the recorded music, and it was interesting to see that for the first time, the video streaming represented 10% of the revenues, but of the recorded music in France, but is nowhere near where it should be if you take on board the volume of streams that are represented by the video streaming. So the value gap still exists, and that part of the usage of music and the accessing of music is not remunerated in the same way as subscription models do. And also, our recommendation would be to set best practices against, payola schemes, coercive practices, i.e. sign with us and we'll take your rights, which happens, or royalty-free models. That happens a lot with production music. Try to put an end to this business of ghostwriters and fake artists, and have more active fight against streaming fraud, which, as I said before, really affects absolutely everyone in the industry. Let's talk about identification attribution. It's a data issue mostly, starts from the beginning. If you have a songwriting workshop with different people. Make sure that you know that all the people that are working on a song are actually listed and identified. There are a certain number of initiatives, in recent years to actually improve that. There are some apps that are very easy to use. You cannot have good data at the bottom end if you don't have good data at the starting point. And that is fundamental. And that is a message to authors and composers. You have to do better. And that's, and there are a lot of efforts here in Europe, also in the US, to raise awareness among songwriters about the importance of data and making sure that you have the right data. Another issue, and that's going into, without going too much into the alphabet soup, there are two main identifiers with music. One is the ISWC, which is the identifier which is related to the composition, and there's the ISRC, which is the identifier related to the recording. One of the main problems is to match the ISRCs with the ISWCs. A lot of initiatives are going on at the moment to do that, to have the best database. It is not there yet. There's still more that can be done. I think it's a collective effort from all the stakeholders, and that also includes the DSPs, the CMOs, and anyone who has access to data to actually make sure that data is improved. One of the issues that related to data that I've heard a lot is UGC platforms that allow users to upload music have a lot of issues with regards to providing proper documentation about what is used on their services. So that is something that needs to be addressed in tandem with UGC platforms. And last but not least, ensuring that creators' credits, attribution, and moral rights are respected. So we're going to wrap by, saying a few words about the CMOs. Collective management organizations, and we're here, invited by GESAC, have played a crucial role in the streaming economy, and that has not always been recognized. But a lot of platforms, streaming platforms, basically sign their first licensing deals with CMOs in their countries of origin. And that can be Deezer with SASM or Spotify with Steam in Sweden and so on. So, that idea that, CMOs have been, behind the curve when it comes to licensing and streaming is probably not right, in the sense that they have helped this market to emerge and to develop. Secondly, CMOs have a direct connection and relationship with authors and composers and represent those people. So I think, if there is a message that can be, taken home, is that there is a need for more discussion, more collaboration between DSPs, CMOs, authors, composers, songwriters, publishers, and all the stakeholders to actually improve the quality and, the ecosystem for, the songwriting community. And I will, finish on this wonderful, slogan. I think it's time to act in concert, and hopefully post-COVID, everybody will be able to attend the concert. Thank you very much. And if you want to send me direct questions, my email address is legrandnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for this very comprehensive presentation of the study. No, it was perfect. It was perfect. And I'm sure there are already questions from journalists, but before giving them the floor, and in order to have the full picture about the study, I would like first to give the floor to two eminent experts from GESAC community, Tobias Hausmüller and David Elsayeg, to give a little bit their insights and perspective from GESAC, from our side on the study. And I will start with you, Tobias, if you agree. What is, in short, the main takeaway from GESAC perspective, from author societies and from the author, from this study? There are a lot of things in this study, but what is the main problem faced today by authors and their CMOs, and how this study reflect on those problems and can help? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I mean, maybe if we go half a step back. What's the reason why we did this study? Because we were in a very difficult situation, right? I mean, streaming market is growing, revenue numbers are going up. Revenue of music companies, even societies, is even approaching the all-time high. So from a bird's eye perspective, the market looks great. Streaming has become the #1 source of income for many music companies. So where should be a problem? Everyone in the music industry and authors and composers should be happy. At the same time, we had our members, which are like thousands of songwriters in Europe and abroad, that tried to make a living off the streaming economy, and they would struggle to make a living. They would not create a sustainable income from musical streaming, and that's a very difficult situation to explain to anyone. If the market is growing, why should there be a problem? And you could see that, well, there's still a few people that can live off musical streaming, but our members largely depend on other sources of revenue still: radio, live, television. And if you have a situation like the pandemic where life suddenly disappears, then you end up in a really bad place. So we were tasked with explaining why the market isn't working the way it is supposed to work. And I think this is when the study comes in and tries to explain, well, there is a market, the market is growing, but there are also some problems in the market. And now we can prove that there is a problem in the market. First problem is that the market is not properly monetized. The market is growing because the number of subscribers is growing, but the revenue per subscriber is actually going down. The market is growing because the services are expanding. They're expanding the number of songs on the platform. You name it, 70 million songs on Spotify. I mean, this is huge. But if the number of songs and the number of streams are growing faster than the revenues, then the revenue per stream is actually going down. So if you look at the market a bit more closely than most people do, you would see that there is a monetization issue in the market, and there's probably not enough value in the market to feed all the people that rely on musical streaming. And the second issue, obviously, Emmanuel pointed that out already, is that there is a transparency issue in how streaming economy works. It's pretty much some winners take not all, but 99% of it market. And that's a situation that we know from other fields of musical exploitation, but I don't think it's been ever that excessive as in musical streaming, because you have so many songs and still so many streams are just attributed to a very small number of songs. So what do we do about this? How can we help that streaming services offer better discoverability, better attractiveness of niche repertoire? How can we make sure that revenues from streaming are attributed to more people, to more songs and more authors than that is currently the case? And then there's the third issue, and that is a distribution issue. How much of the revenue ends up in the pocket of whom? I mean, we represent songwriters and composers. Emmanuel said every stream starts with a song. It's a song economy. I mean, where would this market be without the songs? And so we should make sure that the people who wrote the songs, the ones we represent, are not forgotten in the value chain. And I think I'm really glad we have this study, because now you can show it to people and explain, well, this is not an illusion. We're not complaining about something immaterial. We can show that there is a problem in the market, and we have some suggestions on how to fix it.
Thank you very much, Tobias, to translate into words our perspective on the study. And I would like to go a little bit in more detail with you, David, about this question of this size of the pie that today is not sufficient enough to remunerate the whole chain, the value chain, including the author. How can we explain that both the user base is growing, the quality is increasing, but yet the remuneration is not there? So where is the problem? Where is the gap? And how can we address that?
Very good question, Veronique. Thank you. I think there is several issues which has already been flagged by Emmanuel and Tobias. I think the most important is the average revenue per user. Since, according to the study, page 21 and 19, you will see it's declining for many reasons. First reason, there is no increase of a price since 12 years. So if you have to take into consideration the inflation, the value is decreasing. It's still 9.9 euro, dollars, or pound, but there is inflation. So the value is decreasing. Secondly, you have different offers. And if you don't take into consideration even the inflation, the value is decreasing. You have in a study by Will Page in page 21, due to alternative offers, family plans, student offer, the value is not anymore 7 euro, which was the case per user in 2015, is around 4 euro per month. So this is the size of the pie. We all have to share 4 euro labels, performers, songwriter, and the usage has been increasingly developed, which is a good thing. We are happy about people that stream, but we have to fix this first issue. It is crucial. The second one, in my opinion, is ad-funded service. There is no business model for songwriter within ad-funded service. You have figures that SACEM provided in the document, which say that if you have a free ad-funded service, and if you have generated 1 million of stream, which is a lot, you only generate a turnover around 1,400 euros, which means if you apply the 15% rate applicable by the CMO, it's 200 euros per million stream for songwriter. And according to a British study, we know that there is almost 4 and 5 different songwriters which are involved, it's an average, in one track. So they have to split 200 euros. They have generated 1 million stream, and 4 of them have to split 200 euros, which means 50 euros per songwriter, which is meaningless. And those figures do not evolve, has not been evolved. Now we have an experience regarding the streaming market. We launched our first licensing agreement 12 years ago. There is a kind of maturity of a business. It represents 75% of the revenue generated by the record industry. So we have experience, we have a long experience, and we could draw some conclusion about the business. And for us, it is true that with ad-funded free service, there is no future for songwriters. So we have to fix this issue. Another point for me, which is crucial, is there was a very long debate between stakeholders, especially in the UK. Should we compare streaming to physical sales or to radio broadcast, traditional radio broadcast? I think it's difficult to make comparison. But one thing is for sure, it's that streaming cannibalizes physical sales and radio broadcast. Because people who get a subscription from Spotify, Deezer, or Apple Music, they don't buy CDs anymore, and they don't have time to listen to the radio because they only have 2 ears and 2 eyes. So there is a problem of cultural diversity. If a very small number of songwriters or performers attract all the value, we have to tackle this issue because it is the pregnant market and it will continue. And in a certain aspect, it is good to have those services. We're not against. We're not saying we should go back to physical sales. People should go back to listen to the radio. We like every kind of mean of exploitation. But there is a fact, streaming is growing and growing. And despite our advice or our analysis, it will continue. So we have to tackle the issue of cultural diversity. We have to think about how could we make the discoverability of new artists, because we know that there is also a huge part of the size of the pie which are led by back catalog, how we promote the future songwriters. And for us, it is a crucial question due to the importance of the streaming market. So for us, it's not we're not against streaming, of course. We launched streaming. We made a bet with a platform. I remember when Deezer came in 2007, no one knew streaming. And all the CMOs, not only SACEM, Gamer, Steam, all the CMO made agreement. So we made a bet on the future. Now we know, we understood that it has generated value, but we have to fix, there is room for improvement in every issue raised by Emmanuel. That's my message, my key message.
Thank you very much, David. Just one very small additional question to you. On these structural problems of fairness, transparency, and diversity, what do you think is the perspective in order to improve discoverability, better recognition of author, which is a point that you already mentioned, that was also mentioned by Tobias and Emmanuel, but just in one word, what can be done on that?
For me, there is, as Emmanuel said, there is a lack of transparency regarding cultural diversity. And in order to table the right proposal, we have to make a comprehensive assessment beforehand. And we need figures from platform to understand how cultural diversity function. Let me take an example. If you say in France, you look to the top 20 of a streaming, you will have a lot of French artists. So no problem of cultural diversity, but should we consider as relevant the top 20 or the top 200 or the top 1,000 artists? These are figures. There is a lack of figures, and we need better assessment. And then when we make a comprehensive assessment about discoverability, about cultural diversity, about European works, then and based on songwriter and not only on production or performer side, we could table proposal.
Thank you very much. And to have a conclusion from you, Tobias, what do you think that is the way forward for our community, for GESAC and its member? What can we do? What are the next steps on the basis of this study? How it can help on that? Difficult question.
It is difficult. And if I had the silver bullet, I'd be happy to present it now. But obviously, this is a complicated and complex matter. I mean, as David has said, musical streaming saved us from the dry years of piracy, right? It saved the market that was on its knees. We're grateful that we have musical streaming. We're grateful that we have these platforms. At the same time, streaming is in most markets beyond its infancy. It is a mature market. Maybe the trade-off between creating value and growth has to be assessed a bit differently now. So I think we have to engage in a consensus, in conversations with the platforms to convince them that creating more value for rights holders is possible. And I think examples like the price raise of Spotify in Sweden show that it does not have a detrimental effect on the market if you increase prices and share the increased value from this with rights holders. So I think that for most of the issues we have addressed today, market solutions are possible and are preferable. So I'm not calling for the European legislator to intervene and dictate prices on musical streaming. I don't think that will be the right way to proceed. For other issues like transparency of algorithms, promotion of European repertoire, niche repertoire versus hit repertoire, maybe the world is a bit different here. Personally, I'm not so convinced that services might change that on their own initiative or just by listening to good arguments from rights holders. I think this is an area where we should further investigate the possibility of regulation.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And now I'm going to open the floor to questions from journalists. I said, Matthew, you have a question? Yes, you need a microphone. Indeed.
Good morning, Matthew Newman from MLEX. Thank you very much for a great presentation, very interesting and informative. I just wanted to follow up on what Tobias Hosmuller just said. He said he's looking more for market solutions, market-oriented solutions, and not a call for like an EU price fixing. But I was wondering what concretely the legislator could do, or perhaps enforcers could do. And I'm thinking about the copyright directive, like who's enforcing that on the member state level. Because a lot of these platforms are not, as you say, going to voluntarily just say, oh, you can have a bigger slice of the pie. That's not the way they're gonna operate. So how would they be obliged to do that? And then sort of a broader question, maybe other people on the panel could answer, but it's about transparency with algorithms. In the Digital Markets Act, this was a key issue. But for other things, for like searches and advertising, but what about for streaming and how your market, your industry functions? Would there be a way for the DMA to start enforcing better transparency of algorithms, which eventually could help your members?
Thank you. Great questions. On pricing and regulation, personally, I don't believe in price regulation if it's not absolutely necessary. But we have to accept that, regulation is setting the environment for pricing decisions made by services. And one of the biggest problems we had when we had the discussions on pricing with the services is that they would complain, well, there is a zero price competition out there, and that is what is now called the OCSSPs, right? Platforms that could distribute a lot of content without paying for it. And that was the main problem that the DSM directive addressed. So at least we have a regulatory framework in place that obliges these platforms to get a license. So step one, this increases the likelihood that a subscription service could raise prices without losing too many customers to this type of cheap competition. At the same time, it maybe makes it more possible to turn the wheel on the relationship between the free tier musical streaming services and the subscription musical streaming services. Because now you would see that those streaming services that offer a free tier have a very good functionality in this service as opposed to the subscription service. So why is that? It's because they were afraid that if they didn't have this in place, people would go on YouTube and listen to music for free. So maybe if the market changes, it is more possible to change this relationship bluntly, to make free streaming less attractive and subscription streaming more attractive. And then there is a third issue, and that is more complicated, and that is that the strategic angle of the music streaming services when they look to build a customer base is different. You have services like Spotify that do pure musical streaming, and you have other services that would use music to attract people into their ecosystem to either sell devices or get free deliveries. So it is important that the market comes to a situation where music has its price, and then it's the job of the service to create the value necessary to pay for the music, and not the other way around, where you have a situation where the rights holders basically end up with whatever the service generates in terms of revenue. So I hope that was clear enough. I think that regulation is important to set the scene for pricing decisions of the DSPs, and that negotiations can be made easier by favorable regulation. And I'll pass to David for the second question on the DMA.
Regarding the DMA and regarding the DSA, the issue for us is DMA is tailored to gatekeepers. And we are talking about content provider, which are not totally gatekeepers. So we have maybe DMA and DSA have created a principle, have set up a principle about transparency of algorithm. But I think we should maybe adapt this principle to content provider. So in my opinion, the discussion could be done, could be achieved through a reassessment of the AVMS directive, which is not targeted to audio music service, but there is an issue. VOD platforms are already regulated by such a directive. And should we extend or not a principle of regulation towards music on demand service? This is a very important issue. And I think that first we need an assessment. This is why it is crucial for us to have relevant and robust information about cultural diversity, and we will decide. If there is a lack of diversity because due to a huge concentration of the value to certain works, things measure should be taken in that sense. And just want to add one more thing, because I totally agree with Tobias. You know, when Apple launched an iPhone, there's never any discount on the sales of a device, but they always offer you 3 months of subscription for free or 6 months. And they come to us and they say, but you should make a decrease because we offer to the end consumer a free trial of a period of 3 or 6 months. This is a typical example in which streaming is developing at the expense of songwriters. And this is not acceptable. Why not a rebate on the device and the full price for the music subscription service? We should orient the value to the content and not only to the device. This is for us really an important matter. This is why we think that, you know, streaming is a 15-year-old business. And when you're 15, you have to take your own responsibility. You have been raised by your parents, and now it's up to you to make the right decision. It's a little bit of a message we want to send today. They have to take the right decision in order to make a real robust business model for the entire community, songwriters, label, performers, and even us, the share of a DSP. So now it's time for maturity.
Is there other question from the room? Otherwise, I'm giving the floor to Burak, who is handling the question from a journalist in written form for journalists who are attending online. Burak?
There's one question on how this study relates to the current studies done in Germany by GEMA and by the competition authorities study in the UK.
I mean, obviously, it's not a coincidence that so many studies are being done in different territories, right? There is an issue, and it was addressed in different formats, but from a very similar angle. And well, to say a few words on the study that GEMA did for the German market. Obviously, there was a German political discussion triggered by a hearing of the Committee for Cultural Affairs by the German Bundestag, and they wanted to have some empirical data on how streaming is working in Germany. So we came up with something that is quite similar, frankly, to what Emmanuel is doing, and came to, I would say, very similar conclusions. Maybe the way of presenting it is a bit different, but by and large, the findings of the German national study support whatever Emmanuel has found for the European market. So I think it's good to have both studies supporting each other, and it is probably more a way of presenting the results that differs between the study. Now, the UK is a bit different. I think we know that this debate has been triggered by the UK, and there has been, the fixed streaming discussion in the UK has tremendously helped to raise awareness for the issue. The report that came out by the, competition authority of the UK has a slightly different angle. I mean, it deals with the same issues, but it looks at them from a purely competition law point of view. I mean, is there sufficient competition in the market? Are there competition concerns in the market? It's not so much about, is pricing fair? Is there enough money in the pot for songwriters is distribution fair. It's a typical document from a competition authority that should decide on whether to further investigate the market or take action or not. So my personal takeaway is that it's a useful document, but it doesn't say that there is no problem in the market. It only says that for the UK, the authority has not found competition law concerns. But happy for the two of you to add to that.
Well, I'm glad that actually the two studies for the GEMA and this one actually go more or less in the same direction. That would have been a bit of a problem if we had conflicting messaging. But the UK, as Tobias said, was more about a certain number of imbalances in the market or perceived imbalances, but did not really address the question of authors and composers. And I think that was really the purpose of the study that GESAC asked me to do, because there was that kind of void in the discussion. And even though, you know, authors and composers in the UK tried to raise those issues, I think it was mostly an issue that was relating to performers and to record labels, and also the internal structure of record labels and their relationship with performers, their contractual relationships, etc. What I would suggest, and that's a personal perspective, you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of GESAC, but there's two things that I think should happen at the European level. One, you know, I was part of the team who wrote that study on the feasibility of a European observatory for music. We still don't have an observatory. That would be much needed in order to monitor all the issues that we talked about, and with, you know, a global perspective from a European angle, and monitor cultural diversity, etc., etc. Secondly, I think there should be from the European Commission a call for tender, and I'm not applying necessarily for it, but a call for tender on the economy of streaming in general, and how it affects European consumers, in which way, good, bad, how it affects the creative class, good, bad, etc., so that there could be maybe a certain number of, you know, determination of regulation or recommendations, etc. That's a personal perspective. I think there might be actually room for that.
Point taken, Emmanuel. Is there other question? Yes, Burak?
And there's one more question on the how do you explain the growing revenues for the song side as shown in the recent studies of Spotify and recording industry versus the findings of this study that says the revenues for the author side is shrinking? David and Tobias, maybe.
Sorry, I didn't really catch you, Burak. What was the precise question?
I think the question is more about that the recent numbers shown by Spotify or the recording industry show a rising revenues for the song side, publishing side.
But the revenue are rising because the business is rising. But it does not mean that songwriters receive a fair size of the remuneration. And it doesn't not, and you have always, when you assess a business, take into consideration the turnover generated by such a business, but also the intensity of a use. Let's, for instance, look at YouTube. They made a statement 2 weeks ago about billions for the music industry, but they never show the figures about how many streams they generated. And when you make a simple calculation, we compare the business, the turnover, and the stream, you see that the amount per stream is nothing. 200 euro for 1 million stream. This is the business of ad-funded service. So you always have to take into consideration different metrics in order to understand fully and comprehensively a business. So for me, it's one aspect of a business. You have to give all the information. It's not about marketing.
And I guess on the split. I mean, you could say that the revenue share of songwriting has slightly decreased in relation to the master right side. But if you start from a very, very bad split and you slightly improve, that doesn't mean the world is perfect. I mean, that's not the moment to stop and say, yeah, now we're satisfied.
And it is true, but what should you compare? What should you take into comparison? The figures that we have, the split that we have in physical sales, or the remuneration that we have in the broadcasting business, which is 50%. So it's also the view of comparison might differ from the starting point. And we are saying streaming is not physical sales for sure, and it's not radio broadcast. It's something in between, because it has all the features of a broadcaster. It improves the feature of broadcaster, and it improves the features of physical sales.
Thank you very much. I think there is no more question. Okay. So it's time to close this session and to close this press conference. Thank you very much to all the speakers and for to the attendees too. Please note that the study itself, as well as several communication documents from GESAC on this study, will be available in a few minutes, or are already available on our website, on GESAC website. And there are some copy of the study here and documents here. So I wish you a very good day. Thank you. Bye.